here. So now we have Dr. Anna Lowitt, who's going to talk about motivating institutional will to change, and she has quite a long title, so I'll let her talk about the ICCVAM process. Thank you.
Yeah, just ICCVAM. Let's start from there. So thanks to the organizers for inviting me to come, and happy Thanksgiving, everyone. So I don't have a lot of time, and the things I was asked to cover is probably about an hour and a half or 2 hours of material. So I've had to make some choices, and so Stan and Rick offered me some more things that I declined. And in fact, there's actually not a lot of technical stuff in this presentation. I know there are a lot of people interested in some of the technical aspects of what I want to talk about towards the end. And we can sit down and talk about that for hours, and I have tons of other slides that I'm happy to share from other presentations. So I'm going to split this into half. I've been honored the last few years to serve as one of the co-chairs for ICCVAM, for the Interagency Coordinating Committee for the Validation of Alternative Methods. To be brutally honest, it is without a doubt the funnest thing that I do. And I think you'll understand as I get through the slides why it's just so much fun. How does this work? Is this? Oh, cool. So you'll see about halfway through that the background on the slides does a shape shift. I'll switch from the ICCVAM background back to my EPA traditional background, and largely that's a sense of how critical ICCVAM is to the work that EPA is doing, and really how the lines have blurred between what's an EPA project under the Pesticide Office and what's being done under the ICCVAM umbrella work groups. And you got to have no matter how many times I talk about it working at EPA, you got to say, you got to have okay, so what is ICCVAM for those of you who don't know? ICCVAM is simply a committee. It's literally a committee of with almost no budget, if any budget at all. It's a committee of committed individuals from 16 agencies across the federal government who share the same commitment to move towards alternative methods, to reduce our animal use, and to do that at the federal level by working together and leveraging across each other. ICCVAM would not do anything without an arm of NIEHS, often called ICCVAM, which is a Center for Alternative Methods, which is a combination of federal workers and contractors. And if you've never worked with the ICCVAM staff, they are among the most wonderful people in the whole of the federal government. Warren Casey is the director, Nicole Kleinstore is the associate, and I've never met a group of people who are more collaborative, more open, who are better listeners. I can't say enough things about both Warren and Nicole and the ILS staff. What am I doing wrong? Oh, I'm hitting the wrong button. Okay, so in 2013, around the time that Warren Casey took over as the director of ICCVAM, Linda Birnbaum wrote an editorial in EHP, which really set in motion a large number of things. In response to this editorial, the members of ICCVAM wrote a short document, it's really 7 or 8 pages, which fundamentally changed how ICCVAM did business. Although ICCVAM was in existence for a number of years and had been moderately productive, the priorities of the committee and the priorities of ICCVAM were not aligned with the needs of federal agencies. So what we did in a very short 5 or 6 or 7 page document was really turn ICCVAM and ICCVAM processes on their head upside down. And what we did was decide, we actually eliminated all the existing work groups and started from scratch. We eliminated all the projects and started from scratch. Each agency identified relatively small projects that we can obtain we can get success in a short time frame, the 1 to 2 to 3 year time frame, so that we can incrementally make progress one project at a time. And that original document back in 2013 identified 3 small projects. One is out of my office, an evaluation of the relative utility of dermal formulation acute studies. Skin sensitization is a cross-federal government effort. And the leptospira vaccine project was actually at USDA. And I can tell you definitively that all of these have been successful and we've moved on. Skin sensitization is a work in progress, but the original proposal has been done. In the last year or so, Warren Casey has led an effort to develop a national strategy or national roadmap for bringing in new approaches into the safety of evaluation of chemicals and medical products. And why this, why now, is really because we're at a crossroads where we can leverage resources. The technologies have advanced greatly. Federal agencies are really at a point now we can start to really accelerate our use of these. And by coordinating in a more systematic way, we can do that. And so this document, which actually we expect to hit the web as final sometime in the mid-December to mid-January timeframe, there's the link that if you're interested in finding it, I would encourage you to look at it. And it really provides the framework for everything else I'll talk to you about for the rest of the presentation, including the OPP work. I'm hitting the right button. Oh, very good. Part of the development of the national roadmap was in a meeting that was held February of this year with over 80 participants across the federal government, not just the ICCVAM, but other parts of the federal government that aren't part of ICCVAM, all listed there, developed with professional facilitation to talk about these shared values of moving towards alternatives, reducing our animal use, but doing better at public health decisions all at the same time. Okay. Thank you. 3 themes emerged from that workshop: the need to communicate, the need to collaborate, and the need to make commitments. We have to communicate with each other, with our stakeholders. We have to collaborate. We can't. No one can do this alone. We have to do this in combination, and we have to commit. We have to commit ourselves. We have to commit our agencies. We have to commit our resources. And without those things, even one of those things not being in there, we're not going to succeed. I think this needs a battery. Okay. That went too far. Oh, well, forget it. The fundamental piece of that document is really summed up in this one sentence that is at the beginning of this of the strategic goals of the document. And I won't read it to you, but it's really about expediting the use of 21st century science to not only, it's not just about reducing our animal use, it's fundamentally about making better public health decisions and how we can do that by working together to build confidence across sectors. Worked. So here's a quick picture that Warren often uses of the traditional approach to validation of alternative methods. You think of a method developer creating a method and moving into a validation scheme, either through ICCVAM or ECVAM, Maurice will talk in a little while, or through the new Canadian process. Our friends in Korea and China, and excuse me, in Japan have similar approaches. And then a workflow of validated assays going to regulatory acceptance, i.e. a OECD guideline. And once you have a guideline, you get industry adoption and regulatory decision-making. That works, right? No. There are breakdowns at literally every step. And that kind of linear thinking just hasn't gotten us where we need to go. So the vision is to do something totally new and different. To turn it up on its head and to really collaborate and through our commitment. First, to think about it from a utilization point of view. Not only regulatory, but industry. If industry is not using new technologies in their regulatory testing, we're really not making any progress. Thinking about it from a technology point of view, we need to help, we want end users, people like myself and many of you in the room, in industry is also end users, to help guide the development of new tools. Like we were talking about yesterday, that old movie with the dead guys in the cornfields, if you build it, they will come. That used to be kind of the prevailing idea. That doesn't work because assay developers don't understand the needs of regulators. They don't understand the needs of industry users. So, for example, trying to turn this paradigm on its head, NICEDM and NIHS now have a new grant out for the development of a new lung-based inhalation assay. And we actually have representatives from EPA, DOD, and CPSC on the steering group, helping that model developer actually develop his assay system. So he's hearing from us how we would envision using it, so he ensures that his validation and his development works towards that end. We also want to foster the use of flexible practices. We want to build confidence. And how do we do that? We have to do that through reinventing the validation process and thinking about it as a confidence building exercise, not as a, quote, validation exercise. We have to build confidence. They can be valid without validated. Okay, so a quick case study as I'm looking at the time tick down. Quick case study on how we're using all the principles in the new strategic roadmap in practice. So ICCVAM really works through its work groups. We have a number of work groups: acute systemic toxicity, skin sensitization, which is a very active group, ocular and dermal irritation, reference chemicals, which is really supporting the EDSP program. We have a brand new group on developmental and reprotox, and this is a group initiated by the FDA. We have also a brand new group on in vitro to in vivo extrapolation, looking at the needs of the regulatory organizations of existing platforms and how we can make sure those fit the needs of our federal family. And we have also a brand new group on read across, which is really being initiated after the passage of the Lautenberg Act. Every single one of our groups contains at least one international partner. In some cases, there are 2 or 3. Our newer groups, we're actually going to be bringing people out from the private sector under those groups. We're working out the process of how that's going to work. But the idea is to be more inclusive in our groups of people's opinions and technical expertise so we can accelerate the use. So I've got the top 3 highlighted in blue because it's really those 3 work groups and the umbrella under ICCVAM that the office where I work, the Office of Pesticide Programs, is really making things happen to do some really fun work. Okay, so you notice the background changed. I've got my EPA logo up. So in my real job, I'm the science advisor for the Office of Pesticide Programs at EPA. Jim was my boss in different forms for a number of years. More animals are used in regular testing of pesticides than any other sector, simply because in the pharma arena, pharmaceuticals can go into humans at some point in clinical trials, and you don't ever test, well, never, don't say never. Pesticides are generally not tested in humans. So I've highlighted there in the green, in the red box, 6 studies, which we often call the 6-pack: the acute oral lethality, dermal and inhalation lethality, eye irritation, skin irritation, and skin sensitization. We get these 6 studies for every active ingredient and every formulation. And I'll give you some numbers of what that means in a minute. About 1.5 years ago, something really cool happened. My former boss, Jack Hausinger, who has also since retired, wrote an open letter to our stakeholders. Now, I would encourage you to read this letter. The citation is there. And this letter has really been a call to action. The response to this letter has been overwhelming and really cool. It's a call to action. And what do I mean by that? That here in the United States, even with the Lautenberg Act, we still don't have a legal requirement requiring us to use alternatives or requiring us to move away from animal testing. The Lautenberg Act encourages it, it moves in that direction, but there's still not a requirement like they have in parts of Europe and some other countries. And certainly not in the pesticide space. But Jack did a really cool thing. He put on paper our commitment to reduce our animal use and to move to alternatives, making better public health decisions, but to do it in a collaborative way and really put out a commitment to do that. And that's really unheard of for a senior level federal worker that heads a major organization to put on paper that kind of commitment. So I'd encourage you to read that letter. It's very short. In fact, a couple of NGOs have this letter up on the wall in their organizations. It's pretty cool. But that letter does 3 things. It commits us to first critically evaluate what studies we use in our 6-pack to make sure that we're only asking for the things that make material difference, that we expand our use of alternatives, and that we reduce the barriers to challenges that both internationally and in the area of data sharing with industry. And you'll see quickly as I run through a couple of slides that we are working on all of these areas. So quickly, why the acute 6-pack? And so we get a lot of 6-packs. In an average year, we get between 200 and 300, and that's in perpetuity. So the reason for that is In an average year, we have between 10 and 20 new chemicals. That's not microbes, that's chemicals, so biochemicals, conventional pesticides, antimicrobials. In an average year, it's about that many. So the overwhelming number of these are formulations, and that largely comes from either supply chain issues or replacements for different surfactants or different solvents. But every time there's a change in a formulation, the company has to do a new six-pack. So we get a lot of these. So this is a great place to start. It's also where the science has emerged and where the OECD guidelines sit. Okay, so quickly, there are OECD guidelines for skin irritation, eye irritation, and skin sensitization, which we have a desire to bring in. Can you back me up a slide? Okay, so quickly, I'm going to run out of time. So if we count down the 6, we have projects in all 6 areas. We have actually fundamentally eliminated already the dermal formulation study. We did that last year. So we're basically down to 5. We have a pilot project that's ongoing where we're requesting companies to do, to voluntarily do, with the formulation testing, to do calculations under the GHS mixtures equation to test the performance, because even though EFSA uses it, no one's actually ever tested to make sure it works. And that's going really well. That's been out for about a year, so that will get us down to 3. So the idea, if we can eventually move to an equation based for the formulations, that gets us basically down to 3. And so I just can't, in 11 seconds, go through all the pieces of what's going on with the eye irritation, the dermal irritation, and the skin sensitization. But what I will talk about is more sort of thematics of how we're going to get there. I don't think Maurice is going to cover skin sensitization, but it's certainly an area I would encourage people to monitor. It's extremely active, not only here in the US, but in the EU, but internationally. There's going to be a special meeting of the OECD WNT in about 3 weeks to actually talk about a new project proposal that was jointly sponsored by the US, the EU, and Canada to fundamentally change how we think about guidelines for skin sensitization and to move entirely to a performance-based test guideline approach, which is really cool because we're talking about eliminating the need to do any of the mouse or the guinea pig studies with one assay and like some predictions. It's just really amazing. And that's a whole hour presentation all by itself. And the eye irritation and the skin irritation, there's a lot going on. It's going to take some time. So even though there are OECD guidelines in the validation process, as Maurice can explain much better than I can, although the chemical sets they use in the validations through ICCVAM are very broad in their chemical space, they're very shallow in their coverage. So let's say for an OECD guideline, there may be only 2 or 3 pesticide products, but we regulate hundreds of them. And the bulk of our work that we need is also in the mixtures arena, not in the single chemical agent arena. So there's a lot of work going on internationally to figure out how those studies fit into the regulatory process. So what are we doing? A lot of really fun, cool stuff. We're working with our federal partners. ICCVAM is really a true partner in all this. We can't do any of that without them. The ICCVAM work groups are critical to all this. Our FDA friends, CPSC friends, and our DoD friends, we all share the same needs, so we're working closely together. We have industry consortia who have been really open with their time, with their resources, and with their data. For example, about a year ago, a number of chemical companies from the CropLife America group shared about 300 of their own in-house R&D data for things that we had the in vivo study for, which gave us paired sets of data for about 300 formulations using the eye irritation studies. And that work was actually shared with ICCVAM, and they've done some really nice analysis, and that's led to what's getting started right now, which is a prospective testing event being co-sponsored by ICCVAM, by PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PCRM, and industry. So we have this consortium of government, NGOs, and industry who are going to co-fund a prospective testing, which is really, really cool. Similar situation with the skin irritation. There's some issues with regulatory agencies actually adopting the skin irritation OECD guidelines. We also have some challenges with our US-based category system. And similarly, IIVS has been doing some just elegant work to re-optimize the OECD guideline, and their new prediction model is performing much better than the existing one. And so they have done a call, and actually some companies from both the biocide side of things and the ag-chem side of things are working together to support this new re-optimization of the assay, which will eventually have to go back to the OECD to finish those circles. The animal rights community is really pivotal to all this. They've been funding workshops. They've been co-sponsoring manuscripts. They are helping train our staff. We actually, the PETA and PCRM helped bring in training for the OECD Toolbox. They've actually helped us liaison with IIVS to get training for our staff. So the NGOs have really been critical. International organizations, because harmonization across the world is such a big deal, the US can make a change, but if our Canadian counterparts or our Japanese counterparts or our friends in Europe don't make the same change, everything goes to the lowest common denominator. For example, here in the US, we've no longer asked for the chronic dog study since 2007. However, because a couple of Asian countries continue to ask for those studies, it's been 10 years and we still get them. I would say we have more than 50 that we never wanted. So all of this work has to be done in collaboration with our international partners to ensure they're moving forward. Data sharing activities are critical. I mentioned the issue, the data sharing with CropLife. A number of the biocides companies, Clorox, Procter & Gamble, Reckitt's Ecolab, have also been very open with sharing their in-house R&D data. Many of those companies have very high ethical standards for using animals, and they're very interested in making this happen. Prospective testing, I mentioned that already. Skin sensitization, prospective testing is actually being done at NTP. So many of their ICCVAM agencies nominated about 150 or so chemicals that NTP is doing prospectively in the 3 major OECD guidelines. And the other ones I've hit, and that's probably all I've got, because I'm way over. We do have a stakeholder group that meets, thank you, that meets regularly. Our next meeting will be in January, and we will also meet face-to-face at SOT to talk about progress and goals and our continued places where we're working together. It's open to anyone and everyone, and in fact, nearly every week we get more people joining, and all of you are welcome if you're interested in just listening in. You contact Shannon Jewell, who is one of the executive assistants to our office director, and we also have a docket where we maintain all the records of everything. So trying to maintain transparency, and that's all I got. Sorry to run over.